Chapter 15. From behind the wall at the entrance to the village, someone shouted in English, "Who is there?" I caught sight of a shadow and recognized it immediately. It was Ruplal Ali, a former soldier. He was wearing a cap as usual, and apparently he hadn't lost the habit of speaking English. He was the only former British Gurkha who insisted on speaking it. With school children and educated people from Kathmandu, he never used Nepali. I had tried to avoid him as a boy, afraid I would have to speak English with him. He also spoke in a very loud voice, which always sounded like a reprimand. His voice still had a strained ring to it. "Who is there?" he said again. I felt a pang of pity when I saw him. His cap had faded. He was wearing a rag shirt and threadbare shirts. It would have been different if he had returned after qualifying for a pension. What good was it to be a British Army man without a pension? "Good evening, Laure Kaka," I said. He didn't recognize me. He was wearing very thick glasses, and as I approached, I saw that the left lens was cracked. I remembered that his left eye had been injured when a leopard had attacked him. After that, I had walked around for several years with a bandaged eye. He had almost lost his life in the mauling. It was the year he had returned from Malaya. Hearing that the leopard was asleep near the village, he had led the villagers into the forest. Then, simply to show off, he had fought the leopard, wrestling it single-handed. It was a miracle that he had been killed and that he had lost only an eye. The story of his fight with the leopard soon became legendary and spread to all the neighboring villages. People from far away come to our village just to see the man who had fought a leopard. After he recovered, Lauri Kaka had two stories to tell. The first was about the experience he had had in Malaya, and the second about his fight with the leopard. He told everyone these two stories. He even developed his own style of storytelling. His Malaya story invariably began, "I got into position with my rifle," and his story about the leopard always started, "The bastard was hiding in a bush." A dog was barking nearby. I saw a heap of cow dung near the wheat field. The sun had moved towards the hills above the village. The old man was staring at me intently, struggling to recognize me. His confusion was understandable. I had left 10 years ago. Finally appearing to remember, he pointed his walking stick at my face. "Ah, yes," he exclaimed. "Are you the same young chap?" "Which chap, Kaka?" "The young chap I used to tell my war stories to." I wasn't sure he really recognized me. All the youngsters in the village used to listen to his war stories. Now, many of them were probably in the British Army themselves, fighting in some war or another. Many others would have joined the Indian Army or gone to Malaysia, the Gulf states, or South Korea in search of work. Only the children of bound families went into other professions, mostly teaching. I wondered whether any of my friends were still in the village. I asked, "Do you really recognize me, Kaka?" "I think you are the son of my good friend," he said. All the men of my father's generation were his good friends. I still doubted he knew who I was, but at least he knew. I had grown up listening to his stories. Finally, he said, "I still get so emotional when I remember your father, and I realize he did recognize me after all." "Let's not talk about my parents, Kaka," I said. "Tell me about yourself." "I'm all right," he said. He embarrassed me and let me in. When I was a child, I had noticed I was taller than my friends and suggested I apply for a job as a clerk with the British Army. When I grew even taller, he exclaimed, "You could even become a traffic policeman." I followed him into the village. The field was dotted with heaps of cow dung. We took a detour, climbing along a trail that sneaked up to the village center. Ahead of us were several women carrying dokos full of grass, which they must have cut from the banks of the river below. I still remember the rocks on the river bank. Those rocks had made me an artist. In the ships, I had seen the forms of people, animals, and birds. The birds that landed on them had intrigued me. I had become so fascinated with birds that once I even tried to fly off the top of a haystack. That flight had kept me in the bed for 2 days. Everything in the village brought back memories. I remember the harvest season when I used to sleep on a bed of hay beneath a blanket of hay. We used to whip our ox. We used to whip our ox to make it walk faster on the grain and to jump on the coal to produce mustard oil. In winter, we used to drink hot sugarcane juice. I looked at the mound where the coal used to be. The last of the sun's rays were creeping over it. Tears came to my eyes. That Panu bastard put a corrugated tin roof on his house, Uncle said. His son sent him money from Malaysia. I asked, "How's your health, Kaka?" "All right, I think about you." "Oh, what to think about me?" "I remember your stories," I said. "No one can forget the man who used to gather together all the children of the village and tell them stories." "Well, I'm glad to hear that. If I weren't for you, Kaka, this village wouldn't hold anything for me anymore." He looked at me fondly. "That makes me happy. It's like my own son has come back." "I'm like your son," I said. "Tell me about the situation in the village." He glanced around, then came close to me and whispered, "Take care, my son. I hear big groups coming today. They take away anyone who is young and strong. They don't give old folk like me much trouble. We just have to give them food, cooking utensils, and plates. They cook the food themselves, eat, wash the dishes, and leave." "Do you speak English to them?" I asked. "I can easily tell who is a Maoist and who is not," he said. "First, I speak in English. If someone tells me not to use the language of the capitalist, I know he is a Maoist and I stop speaking English." It was Kaka who had bad geared my father to send me to Budanil Country School in Kathmandu in the 5th grade. My father had agreed, but when we reached the district headquarters, the entrance exam was already over. "Your son's an intelligent boy," Kaka said to my father. "Send him to good school, at least to the People School in Gorkha, or the Gandaki boarding school in Pokhara. He will study in the village," my father said. "If he works hard, he will do well anywhere." My father was a very strict man. He had threatened to throw me over a cliff if I didn't go to school. I still get goosebumps when I thought about it. "Go to school," he had boomed, "or I'll throw you over. Do you hear the growl of the leopards?" Stubbornly, I refused to go until finally my mother dragged me to school by my ears. "How's the school these days, Kaka?" I asked. "There's no school anymore," he said. "A bomb exploded when the children were studying." We climbed a hillock in silence. Someone came towards us holding a radio. My father brought a radio from a British Gurkha before I was born. It was the first radio in our village. My father gave the soldier milk cow for it. All the villagers used to gather in our house to listen to it. After the batteries ran down, that radio didn't say another word, no matter how hard I twisted its ear. My father told me once. In the end, he had exchanged it with the same soldier for an aging cow. I knew the cow couldn't bear calves, but at least it could still produce tongue, he had explained. The smell of cow dung grew stronger as we approached the place where my house used to stand. I wasn't sure if there would be anything left of it. I said to Uncle, "I guess my house must be wrecked by now. Can I stay with you?" "Silly boy," he said. "Do you have to ask?" From Kaka's house, I looked over to where my house used to be and was surprised to see it still standing, the slate roof intact, but the veranda and the wooden pillars supporting it were crooked. I walked over and looked at its decrepit facade. The courtyard was a shambles, as though packs of village dogs had run through it. The peach trees were either dead or dying. After a while, I returned to Kaka's house. Darkness gradually enveloped the village. Someone somewhere started playing a flute. I remembered Krishnalal, a man who used to wander through the village playing his flute. He could never stay still while he was playing. Who is playing the flute, Kaka? I asked. Have you forgotten Krishnalal? Krishnalal still plays the flute. I beamed in joy. Does he still roam around while he plays? He can't walk, Uncle said. They took the bullet out of his leg, but it didn't help. He was caught in crossfire, he explained. He was wandering around, playing his flute, and didn't hear the firing when it started. I looked away towards Subhasankar's house. There was no sign of life. Subhasankar used to go to Kathmandu once a year, walking 7 days each way, just towards Indrajatra. You won't go to heaven if you haven't seen it at least once in your life, he used to say. And even if you do get to heaven by mistake, they will ask you have seen it. And when they find out you haven't, they will send you straight to hell. I learned from uncle that Subhasankar had gone to heaven a few years earlier. Kaka offered me a glass of hot water. Here, have some water, he said. The village felt unnaturally quiet. It seemed as if there was no one else in his house. I wanted to ask but didn't know how to phrase the question. I just looked at the veranda of my old house, the veranda where I used to make drawings as a child. Once I had even drawn Kaka as he told us his stories under the tree. I had also made many drawings of a mustard field next to my house. I still remember how the pollen in the mustard flowers looks. Drawing in a mustard fields was the beginning of my love for color. One day I stole money from my father's shirt pocket and bought color pencil in the market. I still feel guilty about it. My father bet a shepherd, whipping him with wet needles, thinking he had stolen the money. I had heard the shepherd lives in India these days. I would like to meet him and apologize. I took a sip from the glass. This tastes like coffee, I exclaimed. Kaka looked surprised. What do you mean it tastes like coffee? It is coffee. I mean, this is good coffee, I said, correcting myself. The smell was unmistakable. It was indeed coffee. Kaka noticed my confusion. What do you take us villagers for? He said. I've had a coffee plantation for 2 years now. I planted coffee on your family's field as well. They weren't being used for anything and you never came back. So I thought I'd put them to good use. That's fine, I said. I look after the plantation by myself, he said. It keeps me busy all day. Then in the evening, I go down and stand by the wall where I meet you. Why do you do that? To wait for my son. Why? Where did Belu go? If I knew, I wouldn't wait for him every day, he said. I put the empty glass on the floor, then realizing there was no one else to clean it, picked it up, washed it, and put it on the table. That coffee was great, I said. The climate gets into everything we grow here, he said proudly. At the point, a group of girls and boys walked past the house in the total silence. Clearly, Kaka had given up the habit of talking to everyone. He just looked at them warily as they walked by. I was also watchful. A girl at the tail end of the group glanced at me. She looked very determined. The boys and girls looked like they were all about the same age. They all wore similar clothes, which might have been uniforms. They all walked at the same pace. Who are they? I asked. People of the new power, Kaka whispered when they had gone. What do they say to you? They say under their system the country will be transformed. Do you know any of them? Yes, one of them. Which one? The girl walking at the back. Who is she? My daughter, the old man said as he walked into the house. I had one daughter and now she has gone. My God, that girl was Yam Kumari. How she had grown. But then 10 years is a long time in the life of a child. I remember her as a little girl, always crying and holding on to her mother's sari. When I left the village, she was playing marbles. I thought she might have recognized me, but maybe she was just wondering who the stranger at her father's house was. Do they come past regularly? I asked. Kaka began to lighting a lantern. You never know when they will come and when they will go, he said. I only pray she doesn't get killed. You those people, at least She is not alone. She is not alone, he said, reassuring himself. Are the others from the village as well? I asked. What? Didn't you recognize anyone? No, neither did I said disingenuously. My glasses aren't so good. If I focus on one, the another go blurry. Have many from the village joined them? I asked. Burke's son, he said, and Panu's daughter, Moti's son, Quili's eldest son, Kumal's second oldest son, BK Biswakarma's son, Kaila's daughter, and Pundit Homnath's, they were probably all there. So, how come you let Yam Kumari join? She was going to school preparing for the school leaving certificate. Then one day, out of the blue, she came home wearing their uniform. She showed me a gun and I taught her how to use it. What was I to do? I thought she would be safer that way. I left the house. The group was out of sight. I walked a little way in the direction they had taken. Darkness was falling, but I could still see the path. The moon hadn't risen yet. I looked at my old house. At this time of day, I used to sit on the veranda reading by the light of a lantern. But tonight, the house where I had spent so many happy hours as a child was totally dark. When I returned, Kaka said, when I look at your house, I want to leave the village myself. I said nothing. What could I say? Come back when you have some time to spare, he said. We could develop a trekking route. If we could establish a route to the base of Tansuli Himal, it would attract people from all over the world. I thought about it and realized he was right. Walking west from the village to the base of Tansuli Himal was like entering a different world. The landscapes were rich and varied. It would be a fantastic trekking route if we could develop it. Tourists would go to Tansuli Himal via Kodgaon and spend a night in our village on the way. The village would be transformed. It could be the perfect place for me to build the resort of my dreams. With a bit of landscaping, my own land with its gentle slope could also be transformed. My house was on a hillside a little way out of the village. I would be the perfect It would be the perfect site for a resort in the middle of the coffee plantation. I could build a center where artists could come and work. I started imagining how this beautiful transformation could be achieved. The heat could be different in the future. People would start coming back. We were living in the age of global communication. Communicating was becoming easier and cheaper every day, thanks to microchips, satellites, optical fibers, and the net. I could live in the village and still be a part of a global village. Trekkers who wanted to experience the hills alone would always come. But these days, everyone wanted access to the net. I knew the thought of combining the hills and the internet was strange, but I was fascinated by the idea of bringing them together. I intrigued me to think that my village, though remote, could be part of the global village. Was it possible? A satellite dish above the god find could use her in a new age. You look lost in thought, Kaka said. One day my house will change, I replied quietly. The old man looked at me curiously. I have got a sketch in my mind, I said, and I am going to hang it right here in this village. Keep dreaming, he said, laughing. But I am not kidding, Kaka. This isn't just an idle daydreaming. Suddenly, someone knocked at the door. The old man leaned out the window and asked, Who is it? Yam Kumari said, Bye, it's me, and shined a flashlight towards the window. I went down, lifted the crossbar, and opened the door. How are you, Roly Poly? I choked. She saw the flashing in my face. Oh, hello, Dai, she exclaimed happily. I saw you before, but I didn't recognize you. So, are all your girls carrying guns these days? Well, we couldn't study, she said, and we couldn't go abroad to work. I was thinking of marrying her off, the old man said from his bed upstairs, but no such lucks. I have decided to make my own destiny, she said huffily. By the light of her torch, Yam Kumari opened a chest in the corner and took out some clothes. Then she took some rice from a container in the kitchen. I was silently wondering what the old man listening from upstairs must feel. Are you going already? I asked. We are taking shelter in the next village tonight, she said. I hope we'll meet again, Dai. She left, but I couldn't sleep the whole night before leaving. She had said, please don't call me Rolly Polly anymore, you skinny Dai. All right, I'll call you Comrade Rolly Polly, I had said. The next morning, Uncle opened my rucksack and stuffed a package inside it. Take it, he said. When I hesitated, he said, it's just coffee, a token of my appreciation for letting me use your land. Then he added, I hope you won't forget us. Don't worry, Kaka, I'll come back. You will? Yes, I am going to come and develop that trekking route with you and build my resort, I said. You may not believe this, Kaka, but I have an idea which will change the face of our village. I'll create jobs for our people and a market for our produce. Sarcastically, he said, you sound like a member of the planning commission. This hill is special, he said as I prepared to leave. You have to understand this hill. I looked at him. He was wearing the same cap, the same shorts, and the same shirt he had always worn. This hill is special, he said again. It's neither too high or nor too low. Near to the top, you can pick kaffir. Here, we have coffee. Kaffir need a cool climate and coffee need warmth. Oranges grow near the top and bananas near the bottom. You can go uphill and pick oranges, then downhill and pick bananas. Do you get my point? I understand, Kaka, I said. He stood like my village, upright but facing an uncertain future. I walked around my one last time, then I walked downhill. There was sag growing everywhere. I could smell it. In some places, it had been picked and left to dry in the sun. I wanted to pull a white radish from the ground and eat it. I could see the field of millets swaying in the wind. My village was looking for a future. It deserved prosperity and I could help bring it. I wanted to give new life to my village. The fields of mustard had taught me how to draw. I had borrowed colors from these hills and wanted to pay them back with interest. I had been given so much by the earth, the wind, the water, and the life and culture of my village. The rows of sag had taught me about straight lines, the hills had taught me the upward strokes of my pencil, and the streams had taught me how to bring them back down. The head straps of the dokos on people's back, the broad brimmed hats on farmers' heads, and the sickles they carry in their hands had taught me curves and circles, the heights of the hills and the depth of the valleys, and taught me the essence of life. The place in the hills where I was born had turned into the coffee plantation. I wanted my art to contribute to the transformation.